So, good morning to all of you. Shall we start?
Yes, sir.
So, in the previous class, we have discussed something about the evolution of the earth, how the earth evolved, and on the earth, how this primary and secondary atmosphere also evolved over a long period of time. Now, our intention is not to understand only the evolution of the earth, but also know how the life evolved on this earth. The first life, how it has evolved, and afterwards how it got differentiated into the present day biodiversity that we observe. So in few classes, let's concentrate on this aspect. The first step will be how the first life, or what you call the proto life, evolved, and later how it got diversified and to the present day magnanimity. So that is the core idea of what we are going to discuss here. Now, all these things we are studying under the heading, what you know, the evolution of life. So, this evolution of life, before starting, probably I would like to make it very clear that what exactly meant by an evolution. Evolution, in a very simple or a thing, if I want to make it very simple, we can say that it is the nothing but the process of change. But when we talk about the organic evolution, it is not the simple change, but it is the significant change which can be inherited, which can be passed on from generation to generation over a period of time. So, this particular aspect of change, that also considerable or significant change, and not only the change, those changes are to be passed on from generation to generation. So, but we know this is very difficult to quantify the change. The evolution we can say, but in a very short period of time, if we take, it will be very, very difficult to quantify whether the evolution has taken place or not, if it has taken place, to what extent it has taken place. All these things will be very, very difficult to understand. It is simply because of many factors that we see. So that's why this organic evolution is not a change over time, but it is also the significant change with significant modification. And the change can happen at different levels. It need not be only in the external appearance of an individual, but it can be in the physiology, anatomy, or it is at the histological level. At different level, these changes can take place. And this change, when it is visible, then we call it as a evolution has taken place. So by now all of us are very clear, because all of you are the students of biology. All living things have originated from a single ancestor or a common ancestor. Only if you plot a tree of life where we the leaves or the birds or flowers, we can say that can be compared to the present day diversity, but its main root, the especially the main root of the tree, we can call it as it must be the ancestor. And as you know, all the branches, leaves, and everything, they have a common root, and like that, we too have all living beings, either ourselves, or it may be a protozoa, or it can be a bird or a reptile, whatever the organism you take, all of them share a common ancestor. So that's why if you want to understand this process of evolution, for this we have to plot a tree of life, and there it will be easy to understand. So it's also very interesting to know that in this particular process of evolution, the new species are formed at the cost of the ancestral species. In the sense, the old species give rise to new species and they perish. So that's the reason why so many organisms have become extinct over this long period of time. So when a new species is formed, the old species generally perishes. So now this is the significant central dogma of evolution, what I can see. Now, the most pertinent question for all of us, being not only for the students of biology, even for a layman also, why we should have the idea of evolution, or why it is interesting to study the evolution. There are many reasons to study the evolution. For a common man, it may be a matter of interest, but for the students of science, it is the process by which we will be able to understand and appreciate the present day diversity and the magnanimity of these plants and animals. So, when I have told you, an evolution always involves a heritable change of significant characteristic over a period of time. So, here, uh, evolution many times it is considered as a unifying theory, and in order to understand this particular process of evolution, we have to depend on so many other branches of biology, starting from paleontology, that is the which give you the clear-cut evidences. Paleontology, as all of you know, it is nothing but the study of fossils, or it may start with the plate tectonic theory. Uh, because all I don't know whether you know, when this earth was formed, it was a single mass of land, but later because of the continental drift, this was shared into number of continents because of the movement of this plate tectonics or plates. So all these things explain us how the evolution has taken place, and this all these things we will discuss later once. And at the same time, we have a lot of misconceptions also about this uh, evolution. Many people have a very poor understanding of the theory, and lot of misconceptions are also there with respect to this uh, evolution. Many times we think that evolution is a process which is merely by chance. Only by chance the evolution happens. No, it is not true. Many times the evolution is directional and it has a purpose also. Though in most of the cases the evolution may not have a purpose, but in some these things it is has the purpose, and it is not merely a process of chance. And uh, there's also misconception that the organs which are not used they will perish, and the organs which are extensively used they will become try to become more and more perfect. Though we agree to this fact to a certain extent, but it is not fully true. And if you go through some of our ancestral texts of any religion, either Bible or Quran or the this particular Bhagavad Gita and all those things, if you see that, there they say that the human was created by the God or so-called supernatural force in a day. But and all these organisms are also came into existence because of some supernatural force or power uh, one fine morning. But this is also a very very wrong concept. And here I would like to draw your attention. Many times, you know, people saying that human beings evolved from monkeys. Though many times we behave as if we have tail, that's a different question. But uh, the generally thinks that if somebody, some kids or students do some mischief, even teachers also say, I have seen that many times they say that, yeah, you are behaving like a monkey, like your ancestor, all those. But certainly, I would like to inform you that human beings are not evolved from monkeys. Nowhere in the evolution it has been told that man is evolved from monkey. But monkeys are not our ancestors, but certainly they are our cousins, because we and monkeys have a common ancestor. That's a different thing, but we never evolved from monkeys. So that's why you should be proud to say that we, including all of us, have not evolved from monkeys. So these are many such examples for misconception about the evolution. And once we study this particular process of evolution, then these misconceptions will be clear to all of you. So that's why in this syllabus they have kept this one. Now, our first goal, as I have told you, is to study the origin of life. We have seen the origin of Earth. Okay, and we know something about the Earth also, and then how this Earth uh, has become a tool for the evolution of life, or it has become the base for the evolution of life. Because as of now, though in the solar system there are still seven more planets, we don't know, or as of now there is no life. We can say that as far as our present day knowledge is concerned. Why the life is found only on this earth, or what are the conditions on this earth which favored the origin of life. So for this, again, I would like to draw your attention uh, to the condition of the earth when the life originated. Because there are many physical conditions, chemical conditions, atmospheric conditions, climatic conditions, which have paved the way for the origin of life. So that's why, for the better understanding of how the proto-life, first life originated, it is again essential to recapitulate what we have discussed in the previous class. That is the atmosphere and other physical, chemical, no biological this thing, physical, chemical, climatic condition which prevailed on this earth during that time. So you know that first Earth was having an atmosphere. What is atmosphere? Atmosphere is the gaseous mantle which is covering the Earth. Atmosphere is nothing but the gaseous mantle which is covering the Earth. So usually the atmosphere encompasses up to 30 kilometers of the Earth. Dense part of the atmosphere lies from the center, from the surface up to 30 kilometers height. You can see the atmosphere, and this is the composition of the Earth's atmosphere at present. So we have 98% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 0.03% carbon dioxide. Present day atmosphere I am talking, because last class I have told you when the earth was formed, the carbon dioxide contribution was more than 10%. Then argon and all other gases together, they form another 1%. So this is the present composition of the atmosphere. And certainly all of us know life didn't originate in this present atmosphere. The atmosphere when the life originated was totally different from what we actually experience and see today. So just here, if you see the present day atmospheric layer, we have different layers up to height, up to 20 kilometers height. We call it as troposphere, and uh, temperature and all those things you can see. Then 20 to 40 we can see the stratosphere, and there lies the ozone layer. Only 2 days back we celebrated World Ozone Day. So this ozone layer, above that we have stratopause as a mesosphere, and up to 80 kilometers, 80 to 85 kilometers. Then above that, there's a thermosphere, or what you call thermocline. It is also known as ionosphere. So this is the division or the layers of the atmosphere. And now, again, going back to the primitive Earth, I have told you, probably this slide I must have shown you earlier also. Uh, Hadain is the term which I have already told you. It is nothing but the earliest time period which prevailed on this earth. Hadain is the name given to the eon. Eon is nothing but again a time duration of the earth when the earth was formed by accretion and meteoritic bombardment. So this Hadain is later divided into uh, something what we can call the different time periods. Then afterward there is Archean, Proterozoic. Then comes the Phanerozoic in Eon. In that we have three era: Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic. and this era are divided into periods, periods into epoch. So the Hadin is the period something 4.5 billion years ago when the earth was formed because of this bombardment and the accretion. So this time, that is Hadin, which is beyond 5 billion years ago to present. So there were the changes, the especially in this period, you can see it has started with 4.5 or 5 billion years. Then you can see two stages. In the stage one, you are having different types of gases. Mostly they were methane, hydrogen, again questionable, water vapor was there, nitrogen, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, argon, and helium was there in the stage one. But later, something around 4 to uh, 3.5 billion years in between, uh, there is a change in the gases of the atmosphere. Nitrogen become more prominent, sulfur dioxide, water, carbon dioxide, argon. In addition to that, neon, helium, methane, all those things have ammonia, all of them have also evolved. The stage 3 atmosphere is the present day atmosphere where just now I have told you, and you can see there's an increase in the oxygen content of the atmosphere which started something 3.5 billions or even less than about 3.5 billion years back, and till today it has been continuing. Now, again, to draw your attention about the early Earth, it was hot. When the Earth was formed, it was totally hot and formed in the inner portion of the solar nebula. And as a result, heat generated from the radioactive decay and collision of the planet is more. The entire Earth was hot. And in the beginning of the Hadin, actually there was no atmosphere because Earth was having very weak gravitational force. The atmosphere has, which is nothing but the gaseous mantle, which is surrounding the Earth only because of the gravitational force. The gravitational force of the Earth is pulling them and holding them. So as a result, we have the atmosphere. But when the Earth was formed initially about 4.5 billion years ago, which was hot, which was almost molten lava, then the gravitational field was too weak. So when the gravitation increase, when the mass with the gravitation and mass have direct correlation. More the mass, more will be the gravitational force. So when the Earth started condensing and by colliding with the other one and merging of the smaller planetismals into a larger bodies, all these things have contributed to the increase of the gravitational force. Only after the formation of considerable gravitational force, not only the present day, even the primary atmosphere also formed. So here, just to draw your attention, primitive atmosphere, uh, what is formed is the result of outgassing. Especially, there were a lot of volcanic activities and outgassing of these gases from the earth crust. Because of the volcanic activities, the primitive atmosphere was formed around 4.4 to 4 billion years ago. It with a time span of almost 1 million. And the early atmosphere was a reducing atmosphere primarily because it was containing hydrogen and helium. There was no oxygen at all. But the present day atmosphere is oxidizing because of the presence of oxygen, but in the primitive atmosphere was reducing absence of oxygen, but hydrogen and helium were there and trace amount of carbon monoxide, methane, water vapor. Water was mostly in the form of water vapor, nitrogen, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, hydrogen chloride, argon, hydrogen cyanide, all those things were there. So, as a result, what has happened because of the weak gravitational force, though there were plenty of hydrogen and helium, they escaped into outer space because of two reasons. One is these gases are lighter gases, and at the same time, the gravitational force exerted by the earth was too weak to pull them back. Then uh, methane, by the process of oxidation, or how you got the oxygen, because of the oxygen water vapor was there. The splitting up of the water vapor provided the oxygen, and that helped in the oxidation of methane into carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. As a result, what has happened, the carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere slowly increased, and especially the ammonia, um, when it was, and there was no ozone layer at that time, so ultraviolet rays used to directly hit the atmosphere, so the primitive atmosphere, and this hydrogen cyanide in presence of ultraviolet rays split into nitrogen and hydrogen. Nitrogen remained here, but most of the hydrogen escaped into again into the outer space, and reduces substances electron rich tendency to lose electrons. So that's why uh, mostly they were hydrogen, ammonia and methane. And oxidizing, which are all of you know, being the student of chemistry, electron poor, they are have the tendency to drain electron. Mainly it was oxygen. From this primary atmosphere, the secondary atmosphere in the state 2 developed something between 4 to 3.3 billion years ago. Again, the continued outgassing because of the volcanic activity from the Earth's interior was prevailing even during that time. So, during this time, water vapor, nitrogen, carbon dioxide were the predominant constituents, and this has helped in the global warming at that time also, with the trace level of carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, argon, and helium. Uh, Actually, the cooling of the earth resulted in the condensation of the water vapor. When the lot of water vapor was there, and because of the cooling, uh, what has happened was the water vapor started condensing and precipitation started, and there was a continuous uh, downpour of the water, something 3.8 billion years ago. Probably this must have created the present day oceans what we see today. So this is the appearance of the oceans dates back to something 3.8 billion years. When the earth was formed, when the earth was having its primary atmosphere, even there were no oceans. And uh, naturally, in the atmosphere, there were many water soluble gases, especially carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen chloride. They got dissolved in the water and ultimately reached the sea, or the ocean, what we call primitive ocean. So, in this primitive ocean, something 3.5 billion years ago, chemosynthetic bacteria must have been formed. Chemosynthetic bacteria.
Sir,
Yes,
sir, screen
ಏನ
ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ
ಸರ್,
ಹೇಳಿ.
ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಶೇರ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ? 1 minute, ಐ ವಿಲ್
ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್
ಟ್ರೈ.
ಶೇರ್
ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ, ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಟ್ರೈ
ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಒನ್ಸ್. ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಶೇರ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ನೋಡ್ತೇನೆ. ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಈಗ?
ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್.
ಓಕೆ, ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಶೇರ್ ಒನ್ಸ್ ಅಗೇನ್ ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಶೇರ್ ಇಟ್.
ಓಕೆ.
ಅಲ್ಲ, ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, ಏನಾಯ್ತು ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಿಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನೋಡಿದೆ. ಈಗ ಹಲೋ, ಈಗ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಶೇರ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ?
ಇಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್.
ಈಗೂನು ಆಗ್ತಾ
ಇಲ್ಲ
ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಸರ್. ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ, ನೋಡ್ತೇನೆ, ಮತ್ತು ಒಂದ್ಸರಿ ನೋಡ್ತೇನೆ. ಇಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ಕಮಿಂಗ್, ಇಷ್ಟೊತ್ತು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು ಅಲ್ವಾ?
ಹೌದು ಸರ್, ಈಗ ಹೋಯ್ತು.
ಆ ಈಗ ಮಾತ್ರ ಹೋಯ್ತು.
ಹೌದು ಸರ್, ಇಷ್ಟೊತ್ತು
ಬರ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, 1 ನಿಮಿಷ, ಮತ್ತೆ
ಮಾತ್ರ
ಏನಾಯ್ತು?
ಹೋಯ್ತು.
ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇದೆ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ.
ಓಕೆ ಸರ್.
ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ. ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಶೇರ್, ಎವಲ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಲೈಫ್. ಈಗ
ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್. ಸರ್, ನಂಗೆ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಉಂಟು.
ನಿನ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಉಂಟಾ? ಅದೇ ಅದೇ ಹಾಗೆ ಒಬ್ರಿಗೆ ಕಾಣಿಸೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಒಬ್ರಿಗೆ ಇದು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನನ್ನ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಯಾರಿಗೆ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಶೇರ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೆ?
ಸರ್, ನಂಗೆ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಉಂಟು.
ದೆನ್ ಈಗ ಇದು ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ ನೋಡಿ.
ನೋ
ಹಲೋ.
ಸರ್.
ಆ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಹೆಚ್ಚಿನವ್ರಿಗೆ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವೋ?
ನೋ ಸರ್.
Yes, sir. Okay, don't worry. However, I'm going to share this in the evening. Then you will see all those things. Let me continue with this. Okay.
ಓಕೆ ಸರ್.
ಓಕೆ, ಕಾಣಿಸಿದ್ರಂತೂ ಆಯ್ತು. ಸಮ್ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಮೇ ಬಿ ವಿತ್ ಯು, ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಬಾಕಿಯವ್ರು ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಿ, ನಿಮ್ಮ ಒಬ್ರು ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಓಕೆ, ಯಾ, ಐ ವಾಸ್ ಟಾಕಿಂಗ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ಕೂಲಿಂಗ್ ರಿಸಲ್ಟೆಡ್ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಡೌನ್ pouring, and this has something 3.8 billion years ago, and many of the water soluble gases got dissolved in water. Especially what has happened, carbon dioxide dissolved and formed carbonic acid, sulfur dioxide dissolved and sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid was formed. So all these things were dissolved in the primitive ocean, and something 3.5 billion years ago, in this ocean, which was having all these gases dissolved, so that mostly acidic, uh, the chemosynthesizing bacteria. I hope all of you know what is this chemosynthesizing bacteria. The bacteria which can survive by the synthesis of chemicals and derive their energy. And first appearance of oxygen in the prebiotic atmosphere is at the later stage. So what has happened? How the oxygen got formed? Hydrogen in the presence of ultraviolet rays split into hydrogen and hydroxyl group, and sometime it was hydrogen and oxygen, carbon monoxide plus hydroxyl group got carbon dioxide and water. So this is how the new chemicals were formed. And here I would like to draw your attention towards one thing. Most of these things happened because of the ultraviolet radiation, and though oxygen was formed at this stage, there was no accumulation of oxygen at this stage. Usually, whatever the oxygen that has been formed at this stage were used for reduced, used up by many of the reducing things. Then the stage 3, I have told you, leaving atmosphere something 3.3 billion years ago. Accumulation of the oxygen to the present day started to an oxygen level reached to the tune of around 21%. It is only 4.30 million years ago. But leaving atmosphere, the first uh, appearance of oxygen in the atmosphere dates back to something 3.3 billion years. But the oxygen reached the present saturation point or present percentage something 430 million years ago. And ozone layer was also started during this, because oxygen plus oxygen form the ozone layer, O3. Then this has led to several new biochemical pathways, and this has also started lot of global biochemicals, biogeochemical cycles. So here, this is the, in nutshell, uh, what we have discussed till now. The principle of geophysical and geochemical process which has contributed to the evolution of the atmosphere. So outgassing, volcanic emission, water condensed, hydrogen and helium escape to space, uh, then meteorites and planetisms, they were at silicon, iron, nickel, mostly they were in the molten form. Now, I have told you, though oxygen, free oxygen is the later contribution about 3.3 billion years back. Even prior to that also, I have told you there was some oxygen, but it was immediately used up for uh, various other purposes. But oxygen was there, because even if you see, um, there will be some banded iron formation where iron got oxidized into Fe2O3 in the sediments of primitive ocean. And for this oxidation, whatever the oxygen that was there at that time was used. And peak occurrence of this Primitive oxygen dates back to something 2.5 to 3 billion years ago, and how we can see even today we can see them in the form of red beads, oxidation of many of the exposed reduced minerals. And to be very frank, even when the chemosynthesis started, oxygen was poisoning to them because uh, no life would not have survived during that period even if the oxygen was there, because the oxygen, for the utilization of the oxygen we require certain enzymes, and that enzymes were not there. So that's why even oxygen was poisoning for these chemosynthetic bacteria like methanogenic bacteria and sulfur bacteria, which were using the chemicals for their nutrition. So later, when the organisms start developed some enzymes for the utilization of the oxygen. So these two things go hand in hand. It's a parallel evolution. One is increase in the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. Simultaneously, the living beings which were formed at that time also started developing certain enzymes or biochemical pathways where they can make use of this oxygen. So now again the same photograph. Uh, this is the what we have stored the global chemostat, how the important elements oxygen and carbon, though not reduced, other important components like nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfate, sodium, calcium, potassium follow the similar cycle. I will come to that.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, slide change ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ?
ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್.
ಏನು ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋದು ನನಗೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಓಕೆ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಹೋಗ್ತೀನಿ ನಾನು. ಶೇರ್ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್, ಡೆಸ್ಕ್ಟಾಪ್, ಶೇರ್. ಈಗ
ಈಗ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಯ್ತು ಸರ್.
ಈಗ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ಲ?
ಹೌದು ಸರ್.
ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ, ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಓಕೆ, ನಾವು so now I was talking about the banded iron formation, where something 2.5 billion years ago, whatever the oxygen which was formed, which has been used for the oxidation purpose. This is the photograph of one banded iron, which even today available when you dig the earth crust. So this is the old rock stone which is red in color, and in Michigan that is known as Jasper knob, and these are the red beads. This shows that in during that time also the oxygen was there initially, but it was not a free oxygen, but it was it has formed reaction with the existing chemicals, and it was used for the oxidation, and as a result the it was in the form of some oxides. Now the process of entire Earth formation was completed about 4.5 billion years ago. So, Earth ultimately experienced a period of internal melting due to initial high temperature and heat and the radioactive decay. As a result, what has happened? Heavy metals are found in the core, especially iron and nickel, and lighter elements were at the periphery. So dense elements sank to the center of the earth, forming a metallic core. So even today we in the earth we have a metallic core. It is because of sinking of those dense elements like iron and nickel. Lighter materials especially rose to the surface, forming a thin weak crust, and the initial crust was too weak to support the plate tectonics as we see today. And so as a result, there was breaking and rejoining of these plates were very common because the entire plate of the earth was too weak. As the cooling process of the earth continued, the crust became thicker and the continents also started to grow as a result of plate tectonics. First crust must be having some basaltic composition like modern oceanic crust what we see and lacked any continents, but later uh, overlying crust would have caused thickening of this innermost crust, and then um, continents must have been formed. The oldest continental igneous rock that we got today is something 4.02 billion years old. That suggests us. And oldest sedimentary rock is about 4.2 billion years old. Mineral, what we call sandstones, even they are available now. So, based on this, we can say that this granitic continental crust must have been formed something 4.2 billion years ago, not early to that. Later, the continents evolved over the past 4.2 billion years ago due to plate tectonics. Here, can you see a photograph where you can see the number of plates which have joined together and forming the earth crust in the North America? It's a one photograph which might have been formed at somewhere 4.2 billion years ago. Repeated collision, what has happened? These plates can be joined and separated. There will be a repeated collision between these plates constructed the modern continents over a period of time. So the Earth's atmosphere earlier and now, we know the same thing which again I am not going to this thing we have already discussed. Okay, now what I would like to again draw your attention, some 4.5 billion years ago, what were the gases? Because understanding these gases is very important in order to appreciate the origin of life. Carbon dioxide, water vapor, nitrogen were the principal gases. Minor gases were hydrogen, hydrogen chloride, and sulfur dioxide. The virtually no free oxygen. This is what we should. The free oxygen produced by the dissociation, which I have already told you. Again, I may not go to this photograph. Uh, This is the difference between the early atmosphere and the modern atmosphere. Early atmosphere, no oxygen, now 21% oxygen, no ozone layer, now we have ozone layer, lot of ultraviolet radiation, but not now there is very less ultraviolet radiation thanks to the ozone layer we have. No land, now we have more land. Lot of carbon dioxide and ammonia was there in the early atmosphere, less carbon dioxide and ammonia, and it was experiencing intense lightning and storms, but now the lightning storms are very less. So now, okay, this was the condition. Now just let's try to understand how the life must have originated. There is no direct evidence for us in order to claim that at a particular day and time, at a particular place, this life, early life has originated. But there are many hypotheses. One is known as prebiotic soup hypothesis. What do you mean by this prebiotic soup hypothesis? Actually, at that time when the ocean was formed, I have told you, mainly carbonic acid, sulfuric acid, and hydrochloric acids were in dilute concentration in the water. And this must have been the base for the formation of another three chemicals like sugars, nucleotides, and amino acids, which must have formed spontaneously. And here, the Earth's surface temperature was much hotter than today. In this condition, the first cell, because first life, it was very primitive type of life, very primitive kind of life. You cannot compare that to present day life. Probably we can say that anything which is having the capacity to reproduce or to multiply, we can call it as the life at that time. Probably we can say that that is the origin of the life or initiation of the life. Anything which is capable of multiplying, dividing, and producing its own copies. So now, if you agree to this fact, we can say that this first so-called cell, not primitive cell, or I don't know even whether to call it a cell or non-cell, but something which has the capacity to form, replicate, by that which can form innumerable number of its own copies, which can be compared to present day reproduction. So that's why the problem is whether to call it as a cell or not a cell, then by what name it should be called. There's totally lot of ambiguity is there as far as this is concerned. In the abiotic component, everything was inorganic. No organic compound was seen there except methane. Carbon was there. The synthesis of small organic molecules, what we call monomers, must have been formed. How? In the atmosphere, no, sorry, in the ocean especially, carbon and hydrogen were there. When carbon and hydrogen, we don't know how, must have coupled together to form the very or the simplest form of organic molecule or the organic monomer. Then, in the first step, in the second step, these monomers thus formed must have joined together to form polymers, nucleic acids, and proteins. Then some self-replicating molecules which can inherit the trait, which can form the copies of its own, must have been formed when proteins and polynucleic acids were brought together. In the next stage, packing of these organic molecules, that is protein and polynucleic acid, into something what you call protobions. Protobions, not the cells, protobions, because these are the one which are produced abiotically and they maintain an internal chemical environment and which started showing some of the properties of life, especially the reproduction, metabolism, and excitability. Because the reproduction, metabolism, and excitability are the three major criteria for anything to save living being. So this must be the four steps how the life, early life, what you call protobions, must have been formed. First, two non-biological entities, carbon and hydrogen, coupled together to form an organic molecule. And this, or what you call monomers, these monomers join and form the polymers, what we call proteins and nucleic acids. And from then, and these proteins must have joined polynucleic acids and must have developed a capacity of self-replicating. Then these self-replicating organic molecules were packed into what is known as protobions, which started showing some of the characteristic features of the life like metabolism, excitability, and reproduction. So these are the four steps, and it is known as a very interesting theory, what you call prebiotic soup theory. Now, What are the evidences that is made available in order to support this prebiotic soup theory? Uh, Operin and Harding, two scientists in 1920s, in the laboratory, they can synthesize organic molecules from inorganic ones. So based on this, we can claim that condition on the primitive earth favored certain chemical reaction that must have synthesized organic components from these inorganic precursors. Inorganic precursors were there, and the condition which prevailed must have favored some chemical reaction. And as a result of such chemical reaction, the organic compounds were formed from pre-existing inorganic precursors. These conditions were different from what we now experience. Then we know atmosphere was reduced, no oxygen, but instead of that, water vapor, methane, ammonia, hydrogen were there. Lot of free electron, and these free electrons could have been used to reduce the carbon and produce organic molecule. This also this also the statement also in the support of the prebiotic soup theory. And energy that is required for this was continuously available from lightning and UV radiation, because there was no ozone rays, so ultraviolet rays were bombarding the earth, hitting the earth, and lot of lightning must have provided the energy which is required for the same. These are the photographs which must have. Okay. This is another one, an evolutionary tree. At the base, you can see that is the thermophilus bacteria, what we call heat-loving organisms. From there, the you can see the evolution of life, especially then two branches. One is the bacteria, and another one is eukarya, and one more what you call archaea. From there, the present day magnanimity of the diversity has achieved. In order to support what I have just told just now, in 1953, two scientists, Miller and Urey, they tested what Operin and Haldane proposed. They could, in the laboratory, they could establish what you call this prebiotic atmosphere, having only water vapor, hydrogen, methane, and ammonia. They used electrodes for stimulating the lightning, and they continued their experiment in a closed environment, creating the prebiotic atmosphere of what we know, what we have just now discussed. From this setup, they could get organic compounds, especially the amino acid that were collected in the water. So they have never used any of the organic materials, amino acids. They used all inorganic materials. Still, they are able to get the organic compound such as amino acids. So this is how they designed their experiment, and as a result of this, in the above chamber, they have created the prebiotic atmosphere. Only ammonia, methane, and hydrogen was there. Um, in order to create the lightning, they have used lot of electrodes, and then water was heated, and in the jar, whatever the sample was collected for chemical analysis showed that after week 15 amino acids were seen in that mixture. Not only that, they could also collect lot of biologically important molecules including ethanoic acid, lactic acid and urea. And when they used carbon dioxide, even they produce, in the first experiment they have not used carbon dioxide, in the next experiment they have used carbon dioxide also and produced the nucleotides. So I think for the day we will stop here, and